Oathbreaker is an exciting format that's picking up a lot of momentum in the last few weeks after being around for about 2 years, and it's a commander variant that we'll be exploring today. Oathbreaker decks are 60 card singleton decks, which means no more than one copy of each card is permitted excluding basic lands. Your Oathbreaker is a Planeswalker, and you also get to pick a signature spell to have alongside your Oathbreaker. Your signature spell doesn't have to be the same color combination as your Oathbreaker, but like Commander, you may only include cards in your deck within your Oathbreaker's color identity. So if your Oathbreaker is black and green, your signature spell must be within those colors. Whenever you cast your signature spell, you have to control your Oathbreaker, and upon it leaving the battlefield, it immediately returns to the command zone. Players begin with 20 life in comparison to Commander's 40 life. There is no commander damage rule, kinda because Planeswalkers can't attack. There is a ban list for the format, this list being separate from the Commander ban list. Take note that Sol Ring is in fact banned in Oathbreaker. I will include a link in the description below to the Oathbreaker's website, where the rationale for the bans is more clearly gone into detail. The format is eternal, so unlike Brawl, you can build your Oathbreaker deck today, and aside from any potential upgrades later down the line or a future ban, it's a deck you can keep forever. No rotation whatsoever. This is what really sold me, as I really don't have the finances to keep buying into Brawl. Sorry, Wizards. The Oathbreaker deck we will be taking a look at in this video is one I put a very personal touch on. It's a deck within my favorite color combination, using a tribe I've longed to build for as long as I've played Commander. Hang on to your acorns, folks, this deck is about to get nuts. This is Vraska Squirrel Queen Oathbreaker. You heard me, Squirrels. I've finally been able to build a wholesome squirrel deck that I can enjoy playing. Our Oathbreaker for this deck is the one and only Vraska Golgari Queen. She costs 4 mana to come out as a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. We can +2 her to sacrifice a permanent, letting us draw a card and gain 1 life. We can -3 her to destroy a target non-land permanent with CMC of 3 or less. And lastly, we can -9 her to get an emblem where whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. The signature spell I chose for this build is Chatter of the Squirrel. Duh. This 1-drop sorcery creates a 1/1 green squirrel creature token, and that's all it needs to do. Our deck is going to be going for 2 main strategies, producing squirrels and whittling down our opponents using them for attacks, possibly taking them out in one shot using that Vraska emblem, or using an Aristocrat style tactic to sacrifice our nutty buddies to get value. I want to begin by covering our mana ramp package. Being in green, we have access to tons of mana ramps, so mana dorks like the Birds of Paradise, Boreal Druid, Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves, and Wood Elves all will help us ramp up our mana. We run Growing Rites of Itlimoc that can flip into what is essentially Gaia's Cradle, only minus the $300 price tag. With these cards at our disposal, we should have plenty of mana to get the rest of our squirrels going. Speaking of squirrels, our next section will cover our methods of producing squirrel tokens. Our signature spell is a very basic squirrel producer. You pay 1 mana, get 1 squirrel. Obviously, the more we use this spell, the more mana we'll have to churn into it, especially with the commander taxes, but I personally feel our strategy is low-key enough early on that our squirrels can get in without too much of a problem. Our opponents will likely not want to trade their removal spells on a single tiny squirrel, and of course we do have other ways of making a few more squirrels. Both Deep Forest Hermit and Deranged Hermit give us 4 1/1 squirrels each, and act as lords to our squirrels to give them +1/+1 each. The catch is that they both probably won't stay in play for very long. The Deep Forest Hermit has Vanishing 3, so after that 3rd upkeep trigger removes the last counter, it becomes Squirrel Chow. The Deranged Hermit requires an echo cost on the upkeep after we cast it, so if we choose not to pay it, it gets sacrificed. Liege of the Hollows has a death trigger, where each player can pay any amount of mana in to produce that many squirrels under their control. We can use this to our advantage, utilizing that ramp to give ourselves quite a few extra tokens. Druid's Call is an aura that produces squirrels equal to the amount of damage the enchanted creature endures. This can be a great blocker into something huge, making a ton of damage that'll transfer into a ton of squirrels. The infamous combo of Squirrel's Nest and Earthcraft make infinite squirrels, and while this can seem a little overpowered of a combo, we actually tend to use those squirrels for value fodder elsewhere in the deck. Acorn Harvest gives us 2 squirrels, and it can be flashed back for 3 life and 2 mana. Alongside our furry little rodent friends is a slew of Aristocrat cards that will either be used to sacrifice our creatures for value, or punish our opponents for letting our little squirrely friends die. Blood Artist, Poison Tip Archer, and Zulaport Cutthroat all drain opponents for 1 life for each creature that dies. Grim Backwoods and Vraska can both sacrifice a creature to draw a card. Skull Clamp can turn our squirrels into card draw. Diabolic Intent is a nice variation of Demonic Tutor where we can sacrifice a creature to tutor for a card, so that redundancy at that level of mana cost is always welcome. Ashnod's Altar lets us turn our squirrels into mana. Jurad Lichlord can let us fling our squirrels at our opponents, potentially taking them out with 1 nut. This is also the reason for some of the big beater squirrels like Squirrel Mob or Crows and Beast. I think that's a squirrel. This deck aims to utilize our token engine as a value engine with expendable, replaceable creatures rather than going the traditional tribal route with the critical mass of squirrels, although this is still possible using the aforementioned Squirrel Nest combo. Given that Oathbreaker starts us each at 20 life, flinging an 8/8 Crows and Beast at each opponent using Jurad becomes a lot more impactful, taking out nearly a half of each player's life total. Now, aside from this passive strategy of making squirrels and sacrificing squirrels, we do run a few cards that can make use of an aggressive turn. Cards like Beastmaster Ascension and Concordant Crossroads can suddenly make a turn of churning out Nutter Butters into an Alpha Strike at the board. And this is where Vraska's Ultimate really comes into play. If we manage to bring her up to get that emblem, then we only need to connect with 1 squirrel. Having several squirrels in play to swing at each player might mean that we'll be taking out opponents a lot easier with some tiny little rodents. It's a bit of an insult to injury if you ask me, but it's a loss they'll remember. We also have Overrun, a classic finisher in a deck like this, combined with Vraska's emblem, and suddenly it's a lot easier we're going to get that 1 lethal point of damage through. Our removal package is rather small but efficient. Abrupt Decay is something I imagine will be very powerful in Oathbreaker given the lower curves that the format encourages, and it can take care of some very early game threats. Assassin's Trophy is versatile in that you can take out anything they control, their Oathbreaker, an early game land, or anything else that deserves Vraska's Stink Eye. Golgari Charm can kill off an enchantment, it can weenie wipe the table, or it can save our squirrels from danger by regenerating them all. Now, to round out this deck, let's talk mana base. We're going with the most aggressive dual lands within a budget here. Overgrown Tomb, Blooming Marsh, Urborg, Mantower, and Woodland Cemetery will help us fix for our colors. Grim Backwoods is a sack outlet, and then 14 forests and 4 swamps will wrap up this deck. That's going to wrap up this deck tech on Vraska Squirrel Queen, but before we go our separate ways, I want to personally thank the Weirdcards Charitable Club, who are the masterminds behind the Oathbreaker format. They're based around Rochester, Minnesota, and they're a non-profit charity that aims to help children learn, and they use Magic the Gathering as a method to do so. I'll include a link to their website in the description of this video, and I definitely encourage you to check them out. I would say they're doing amazing work, and that if you ever can donate to a worthy cause, to maybe consider them. So I hope you enjoyed this Oathbreaker deck tech. Do you think this is a format you'd be interested in seeing more of? Let me know down below. I'm already loving how zany of builds I can put together in this format. Squirrels! If you want to help support us here, consider liking and sharing our videos, subscribing with notifications to keep up to speed with our uploads and such, and if you want to be a super rockstar squirrel enthusiast, we do have a Patreon that helps us build up to better content. Anyway, I appreciate you hanging out with me to talk some Magic for a bit today, and as always, I'll catch you all next video.